So then we had the development then of sheltered instruction. So what did they say? There's basically, after they observed and looked and analyzed all this data, they found that what was the write fast, guys, write fast. What, and then you also have them, some of you guys have them on flip books. Not everybody does. Unfortunately, I ran out, right? But if you have them, you have a little flip book, those are the 8 components. So you don't have to try to rush and write through them all, okay? So there's 8 components for the SIOP model if they're actually implementing it uniformly and successfully, okay? The first one is preparation. Preparation is key, right? It's what happens in the teacher's mind when they're envisioning what this lesson's going to look like and how are we going to prep for that. So I had to do this. I don't know if I have ELL students in the classroom, but now I think it's become so ingrained in me that it's just something that I do. And then I don't really know that I'm doing it until somebody points it out. Hey, did you notice it? It just became kind of practice for me. So what's the prep? So as I was planning this today, for example, I'm in the classroom. It's different. I know there's I think a slight disconnect between from what I learned, for example, when I was in the university, a different style, right? But when I'm in the classroom, then I'm like, kids flatline. I can't talk to them longer than 15, not even 5 minutes. Then they're like, well, I bet you they know how many tiles are on the ceiling after 5 minutes. I can't sit there and lecture. Even with my GT kids who are non-ELL kids, I cannot do that. I'm going to lose them. Okay? So what is it that I can do to make them then stop and process? Okay? Adults are the same way. We flatline. There's this really cool research project that came out, I believe, out of MIT. And they put little receptors, and I should remember right now, but I'm flatlining, on all these college students for the week. And then they went ahead and analyzed that data on their brain activity for the week to see what was going on. So college students are going through lecture, they're going through their regular day, they're watching TV. They never took these off. And so what was a big eye-opener for me was that when they're sitting in a lecture, they're flatlining. Like literally, the line goes flat. When they're dreaming, there's way more activity. So their brain's actually working better when they're sleeping than when they're sitting there listening to me lecture. To me, that was like, whoa, I don't want that to happen. So I need to chunk it. So the very first thing is prep. Putting that time in thoughtfully and thinking, how is this lesson going to look? Sometimes, hey, we have to wing it. Sometimes you have a crazy day and the PowerPoint's flashing, right? So you just have to go with what's happening. The second one, you need to make connections to prior knowledge. All of us work that way. Brain research shows that we don't learn anything new unless we connect it to something we already knew. Okay? You really didn't learn it unless you could come up with some kind of visual for it. We think in pictures. So when I say a word, when I say Jupiter, are you spelling the word out in your head, or are you picturing Jupiter? Okay? You have to make that connection, and we have to start making those connections from what this new information that we want the students to get to prior knowledge. Okay? Yes, sir?
A question about that. Is there a difference in how it's implemented in relation to certain other languages? So I mean, for instance, like in this community, it's like Rajasthan.
Yes.
But like some languages like Arabic have like 3 roots. They usually have the morphological function.
What's awesome, what they've actually found is that the basic thought process is uniform.
Okay.
That basically our brains all function the same. The languages might be different, but what we're processing and how we actually store that information is highly visual.
Okay.
Okay? So comprehensible input, that's a fancy way of saying how are they going to understand it? How are they going to comprehend it? How is it going to go in? Okay? Strategies. They need to be appropriate, given an appropriate instruction, support, and assistance. You have to vary your strategies. Yes, there's a time and a place for notes. There's a time and a place for lecture. There's a time and a place for group work. We can't do that every day. Okay, so we have to vary our strategies to what our purpose is in the classroom. Okay, so if I want to give you information quickly, then yeah, I'm going to stand up here and I'm going to tell you in like 10 minutes, 15 minutes what's going on. This is what I want you to do. Yeah. But I'm not going to do that for 45 minutes. I'd lose you. Okay, interactions. Basically, use it or lose it. Okay, interaction equals proficiency. So when students are using this information, interacting with one another, having that conversation, that academic discourse, when they're actually talking about the content and not about what they did on the weekend or what they're going to do for lunch today, that's great. ELL students need that because that's social language and that's what they're first kind of emerging with and getting comfortable with. But we want to get them to the point where they're using academic language. Okay, I'm not saying there's not a place for social language, yes, because they need it. They're comfortable and we're trying to reduce that anxiety for them. Okay, so of course you wouldn't say, no, you're never going to talk about that. However, we need to build in, by design on our part, times when they're going to be able to interact with each other to specifically use interactive academic discourse, academic language. We won't, for example, you know Cesar, right? Okay, so we're talking, did I start talking to you about, well, he is an excellent Algebra 1 teacher, and he teaches linear functions. And that's not something I break out in language. I mean, we're communicating. That's not normal. Kids aren't going to do that either, unless we give them the opportunity to say, hey, today we're going to talk about linear functions, and I'm going to give you some frameworks for that. Okay? Practice. Hands-on manipulatives. Okay, they have to be tangible, something they're going to be able to move, cut, paste, look at, manipulate. Okay? We have to, lesson delivery, it's focused on objectives. So I don't know if you remember, if you noticed, I know it's kind of weird and there's been, again, this big movement towards content objectives and language objectives. But we need to be, have a razor focus on what we want at the end. And if we don't, then we tend to meander. And eventually we'll get there. But we have a short amount of time in the classroom, and it's getting smaller and smaller. Now I have 48 minutes for each period. I tell my kids, those 48 minutes, you're mine. I only have you for 48 minutes for the day, and 48 minutes, you're mine. That's less than a show. People watch The Walking Dead for an hour, right? That's less than 48 minutes. Walking Dead's big right now, I know, okay? So there's no time to waste. And then finally, review and assessment. Be able to give them time to then, let's review what we did, let's go over key vocabulary and concepts, and then give them feedback and quick feedback, especially with ELL students. Okay, well, everybody uses, all of us need correction, all of us need praise. When we do something well, we want to be told. And when we do something where there's room for improvement, I'm not going to improve it unless you point that out to me, saying, you did great, but this part you could kind of work on. Okay? So this is what they found was in common amongst the different settings that they went and collected data on, where they had good classrooms, where they're actually, I hate using the word good classrooms, I mean, where they had effective classroom settings, where the teacher was implementing the SIOP strategies, but consistently. These are the 8 things that they found that all these particular teachers, whether they were teaching different contents, were doing. Okay, all of them were prepping. All of them were accessing background information. All of them were thinking about, how am I going to get this to make sense to them so that they could comprehend what I'm trying to tell them? How am I going to teach the cell? How am I going to talk about all those different organelles inside the cell if they don't even know what that is? So then I could think, well, I could compare it to a city. I could compare it to something that they actually have access to. So that's one of the things we're going to do today. As I was planning this out, I realized that everyone has different content backgrounds, right? I'm not too sure. What are you going to teach?
Generalist 4 through 8.
So everything.
Yeah.
Generalist 4 through 8, you're going to teach everything. What are you going to teach?
Spanish.
Spanish, perfect. Okay, what are you going to be teaching? Okay, so all of us have all these different backgrounds, right? So then how am I going to design a lesson for you guys today? And I'm going to say, okay, all of us, we're going to talk about cells because I feel comfortable with cells. Well, some of us might feel comfortable with cells, so some of them doesn't talking about. Okay, so our lesson today is going to be based on something that's you're comfortable with, hopefully. Okay, so we're going to focus on 3 things. Passing a driving test. Hopefully we all drive. Yes? I try to make the assumption. I think they would all drive. Okay? So everyone has to pass that. Everyone has to get their license. So that's something that will lower the anxiety, hopefully, if you're a good driver. Okay? The second one is, Cesar, how to run. How to run a marathon. I'm like, really, Cesar? No one's going to run a marathon. And of course, we had some teachers that really went for, yes, we're going to do the marathon. No. I'm like, we're not planning to actually run a marathon, guys. We're discussing what we need to do. Okay? And then the third one was how to upload a website. Okay? That's not my strong suit, but I'm sure there's someone in here who might have some ideas as to what would be some steps for that. Okay? So, 8 components. Yes? Okay. Building background, preparation, building background, comprehensible input, strategies, interactions, practice, lesson delivery, and review, review, review. So what now? Okay, we're going to break these, that's good actually. This is like pretty much my last slide, I think. We're going to break these components up for the rest of the day. Okay, and we're going to practice using them. So as far as sitting down and taking notes like this, we're not going to do that anymore. So if you have, I'm sorry about the flip books. Again, life happens. We had a blackout at school yesterday for 2.5 hours. And I had a meeting in the morning for 2.5 hours. So I'm like, really? So this is as many as I was able to get shot out. Okay, so we're going to be taking notes. What the little flip book is for you guys is to write down, okay, what are some ideas for preparation? What are some examples that we did and so forth? And those of you guys who don't, you got some paper. Sweet? Got it? Okay.